Thank you very much. Yeah, so look, as Todd said, this is recorded. If you need to duck out, I was chatting to some guys yesterday at one of our seminars we were running, and there's always this thing, oh, I can't attend it live. Doesn't matter. We've got them recorded. They'll be time stamped on our civil site design YouTube channel. So these are a little bit more exclusive, going on their own dedicated channel, and they'll be there for you to watch if you want. So civil site design Cogo Points. Now, I just thought it'd be worth giving a little sort of potted history of where they have come from and where we're at now. So they've actually been in the software quite a while, to the shock of a colleague I was speaking to yesterday, Andrew Banson. He was quite surprised at quite how long these have been in the software. But we were talking about their sort of progression to where they are now. And originally they came into civil site design back in one of the versions of V20 to help our US customers bring in Cogo Points or create Cogo Points from survey data. Not something we found to be particularly applicable to our particular market in Australia. V21 or a variant of it, we added the option to connect these Cogo Points together. Again, more for the survey guys. So there's a little bit of an overlap with Stringer Topo here, but the intention is that, you know, if you are doing a little bit of survey, then you've got the option to be bringing in these Cogo Points. However, in version 22, we added the option to actually enable people to have these Cogo Points displayed in the vertical grading editor through the auto profile form, which, you know, by and large wasn't particularly used, and particularly as people weren't actually creating the Cogo Points. So I undertook some training last year with a company that were looking to do quite a number of lots, individual lots and blocks of lots, and designing them with civil site design. And the process around doing that was, and is, if you're not using Cogo Points, can be fairly time consuming. It can be done, but it's not quite as dynamic. Out of that, we developed some tools, which we're going to see today. And in V22.2 onwards, we added those tools into the software. And then we also made a tweak in V23, where you could also add those Cogo Points to your string as sample positions, which, to be fair, are an integral part of how the Cogo Point elevations actually work, and you'll see those in action. So that's a very short history. So I guess one of the questions is, you know, you see an entirely new set of tools in civil site design, and you're going, well, okay, why am I going to use those? How am I going to learn them? So my intention today is to take you through a really very sort of basic lesson on how to incorporate these Cogo Points into design. We're not going to look at the mechanics of the point, the properties of the point, all sort of the technical aspects in the background. What I'm going to show you is everything you can do out of the box. So when it comes to using these points, first of all, these are civil site design Cogo Points, okay? These aren't civil 3D Cogo Points. These are civil site design. They're actually just really easy to create and manage, as you'll see very shortly. They're created from dynamic blocks, out of the box, nice and straightforward to operate. And then we actually have a really nice point group editor where you can actually go and see all your points grouped together, which we will cover. One of the things that these points do, which no other aspect of the software will do, is to actually reference each other. So what you're going to see today is me creating Cogo Points at the back of the lot here. And for some reason, when I hit Control, the PowerPoint fades. So I apologize if that's happening to you. I'm not going to hit Control.
It doesn't impact anything for us.
Okay, it does for me. That's okay. Well, in that case, I'll skip back because I'm trying to use the Control button to highlight where my mouse is for you guys.
Yes,
and when I'm doing that, good, fantastic. Thank you, Todd. So these Cogo Points can reference each other. So you could have a string of Cogo Points. For example, what we're going to be doing here is having these Cogo Points at the front connected to the road. So they're reading the road elevation. The ones at the back, rather than reading the road, they're actually reading the point at the front. So they can be interconnected, which is fantastic, which means you can reference without the need to be creating kind of intermediate strings to create connections between points. So in this example, and I will cover this one as well, this is not so much lot grading, but it's really for the, I know we've got people in the audience today who are certainly more council focused and maybe more recon and rehab focused. There are Cogo Points here and here, and they are referencing the elevations of, this could be a building slab around the edge, or it could be a car park. You can see they're 5% and 10% from that building slab. We can then design this string of this boundary here to be either using those elevations of those Cogo Points, or we can adjust the elevations, but using them as a reference. So I'll show you the example with that just trying to keep this nice and simple today to show you how you can operate them in two separate areas. Now, because you can apply them to the vertical grading editor as actual IPs, which is what this is, okay, so these are the Cogo points, you're essentially locking the vertical design. So any of the elevation data that you plug into the Cogo point, even if it has a reference, that elevation can be applied to the vertical grading editor through auto profile, okay? The last sort of addition I want to make here is, saying the word addition when it's right in front of me, is the creation of sample lines. So as you can see here on the left, got a couple of Cogo points, and what I want to do is have those create or determine the position of sample lines on my road string here, which is what's happening here. So this can be a great way of, particularly when you're maybe creating design variations, or maybe want to do template changes, or basically wherever you want to make changes along a string, generally you need a sample line. So you can create Cogo points and have the software use those to determine the positions of those samples. So today we're going to focus predominantly on this example here. So underneath you're seeing the cross-section window, which is a cross-section through the center of this particular display at the top, which is Model Viewer. What we're going to be doing is setting the elevations of the point at the frontage of these lots to be pretty much at the same elevation of the road, which you can see there, the right boundary code. Then setting the elevations at the rear. To be honest with you, we could put any slope we want. This is on the side of the cliff at the top of the job here, so I put 5%, but as you'll see very shortly, we can do whatever we want with respect to slopes. One thing I just want to highlight to you, and you've maybe seen these red boxes appear, is that we can show the Cogo points in a couple of different environments. At the moment, we can see them in the cross-section window, and we can turn those on with this survey tab, which came in V23. And I can't remember if it was in V23 or if it was possibly V22.2, due to the fact that we were adding in, obviously, the survey points and the survey lines, etc. I think it was V23. Or no, sorry, V22.2. We added the option to add the Cogo points into Model Viewer as well. So they're actually at their elevation with a little display marker, which is, you know, for context, can be very, very helpful. Lastly, just before we tuck in, I just want to show you, this is a job that was undertaken by Rod Smythe. He is a designer at Miles Civil Design. They're based in Warragul in Victoria, and this project was undertaken, and well, it was actually started in, I think it would have been March, April time. Rod was actually going to do this entire project with the current tool set without using Cogo points, and one of the difficulties he was finding is just the amount of time it takes to design and then maintain the dynamic connection to your road, and also between these retaining walls. So you can see here, there's a lot of retaining going on through this, and there are different criteria for retaining wall heights, which he's stepping through here. Now, we're not going to do anything as complex as this, but with the tools out of the box that you will see today, Rod was able to design these lots, and I think the project recently just finished in respect of completing the actual design. You can see there how he's incorporated the points. So this is a real example of something that's been done in the past couple of months, and from what Rod has told me, the amount of time that has been saved on this is probably over days. Certainly hours, but days of time saved by incorporating the Cogo points, and he's done that very successfully. So let's have a look at how you guys can do the same thing. Now, I'm just going to ask Todd, is my Civil 3D in full view?
Yes, it is. We can certainly
Fantastic.
see, what is it, our Mollymook project.
Indeed, yeah. Look, this is a generic job, but at the end of the day, it's great to convey a message without it being too overly complicated. At the end of the day, this is a real job, and these are real lots that were designed. So we are going to be utilizing it for what I'm going to be showing you today. Now, I didn't go through an agenda because there's loads of things. I'm going to cover that at the end, really kind of just highlight the key points that we've covered in today's webinar. So when it comes to lots in particular, one of the key things that this project required was that each one of these lots was designed independently. Now, you can design, as you'll probably see here, an entire block of lots. Okay, so we don't actually have to design individual lots like this. We can actually go through and use the tools that you'll see very shortly to design this entire area in one hit. However, I'm going to be focusing on this area. And one of the problems with designing these particular areas is that people tend to go ahead and design strings for example, this area here for 37, and then design 38 and have those boundaries of those two strings, so this point here, have them on top of each other. And the problem is that when you come to use Model Builder wants to interpolate which string goes where. And if they're directly on top of each other, it doesn't know. So the software is trying to interpolate this string of 37 and then the boundary of 38. And because they're right on top of each other, it isn't able to interpolate. So what we always promote is that you create a polyline with an offset, just slightly. Rod's job, I think he was doing something like 50 mil. In fact, he might have been doing less than that. I've put half a meter. Half a meter is far too big, but it really helps give clarity as to what I'm doing. So please don't think you're going to be doing half a meter offsets for this. Really isn't necessary. Now, creating these polylines can be a cumbersome process if you're just using CAD. I will just highlight, when you go to the Home tab on AutoCAD and BricsCAD and Civil 3D, they're all going to be the same. You will find that there is a boundary tool. This is like creating hatching, but it's called bpoly, or you can type BP in your CAD environment. It'll bring up the same thing. That will draw a boundary polyline as if it was going to be flooding it with hatching. Okay, so you can use that tool to generate polylines, assuming you've turned off some of the content inside. And if we just use this, the selection cycling tool, you can see I've got these polylines already generated for my lots. Now, the problem is the offsets. So if you've got, you know, heaps of time on your hands, you can go offset 0.5, click, 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 click on your merry way. However, in civil site design, and this might seem a bit odd that I'm now jumping to the pipes tab, but in the pipes tab, we actually have a tool which will do this for you. It's connected to the sewer tool. So the sewer tool will basically allow you to put a house connection through a lot, and it will use constraints using these, basically will use an easement around the lot to determine where it can actually make the house connection. This first tool here is actually just a generic CAD tool. It doesn't do anything special other than create the offsets. So you can use this tool whenever you want. So I'm going to click on house offsets. Now, it will pre-populate for me because I've done a bit of time saving, but what you want to do is pick the layer where your polylines are already drawn, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go in down the side. I've got selection cycling on. So there's the layer. It then says, what's your offset? That's a big offset. You don't have to use anything like that. It's always going to offset inwards, this tool. It never goes out. And then the layer onto which the new offset should be drawn. Do not use the original layer or this layer to offset them onto, because the software won't like it. You need to make sure that you create a brand new layer. Let's click OK. It's going to delete any offsets that were already created on that particular layer. You say yes. That layer I've created is yellow with dashed line work. Okay, so that's why it looks different. But now I'm on my way, or now in a position to start creating my Cogo points. So this is where we jump to the Sites tab. And there is quite a bit going on here now. For the BricsCAD users, it might look slightly different, but the pull down that you're after, or the panel you're after, is CSD Cogo. You may see that it says import points if you're using V23. If you're not using V23, I think the Cogo Point tools are actually over here, but we've had a bit of a rehash of this panel, or these panels. Then we're going to pick points by polyline. Now, you've got a couple of ways you can do this. You can pick an entire layer. So all these polylines that I just created, I can actually use to create all the Cogo points in one hit. If I wanted to, I could do the whole job if I've got all of the polylines already created, which is absolutely fine. Or I can go and cherry pick the ones that I want to use. I'm going to use by selection. Now, in a minute, I'll explain. You might initially go, well, if I'm picking all of these polylines up in one hit, how does it know which road to reference? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm going to go select polylines. I'm simply going to pick just this one here. I'm going to keep it nice and simple. Underneath, we've got the Cogo Point creation, and the most critical part of this whole process is the code. Now, the reason why I say code is because in a minute, we're able to use codes that have a certain, Cogo points that have a certain code. So think of this as simply just a name. If they're called LOT, they go into a little group, a point group, and then I can use that point group for the vertical design. Now, if you make a mistake at this point and you put LOT lowercase, which I'll talk about later as he presses caps lock, LOT lowercase, they'll actually not go into the point group. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm just going to use LOT. And again, this is out of the box. The start string number is really down to you. If you're picking multiple polylines and you don't pick them in a particular order, this number is almost redundant. Every point will be uniquely numbered. As you can see here, that says lot 36, but don't worry about the numbering too much. In this case, I will put 38 because I'm only picking one polyline. The style is how this point will be displayed on the screen. I recommend you just stick with the default because it's going to show you the point number, the elevation, and then the code, which in our case will be lot 38. Next, we click on the elevations. So this particular tool has the option to now set elevations of these Cogo points. Now I could, if I wanted to, just say, look, set an elevation of 100 all the way through. I could say set the elevation of these Cogo points from the surface. Well, that's not why I've come to this point right now. I've done it because I want to connect them to the road. So you can use auto frontage. Now, auto frontage says, look, I'm going to search 15 meters. This is a metric drawing from my centerline of my road. If I see any vertices on your polyline, I will apply points to that polyline with, and this is when I'm going to click on set up dynamic elevations, an elevation. So at this point, I could say, well, I just want them to be at 34. Okay, I could say that, but this is where these points come into their own because I can actually get them to use the elevation of a code on my string here. So I can go reference string code. I'm going to go and pick near row 2. Then I want to pick up the right boundary code. Then I could, if I wanted to, say add 1 meter. I mean, I wouldn't do, but this is the kind of thing, or subtract 0.5 or something along those lines. In this case, I'm actually going to put in 0.01. And the reason why is, and you'll see this very shortly, is that the point actually connects to its reference physically on the drawing. There's a little graphic. If you have no reference value in there whatsoever, nothing gets displayed. Okay, so I'm going to put a very, very small grade just so I get that little marker, which we'll talk about in a second. Click apply. Now, what happens with the ones at the back? So it says here, do you want to do anything with the points at the back? If not, it will just use 100. I say, yes, please. And the minimum distance means it's going to look 20 meters up my polyline. Then once it gets that 20 meter point, it will go past it looking for vertices. So any vertices that occur 20 meters past this point, imagine you've got a few down here. You don't necessarily want, this happening to those. You want it basically for any at the back. I want them to be -5. Now, all of what I'm doing is editable. Okay, so this is think of this as just building it for you that you can go in and then do all the hard work. Okay, well, sorry, it's doing the hard work. You're then going and modifying it afterwards. So let's click on create Cogo points. So the Cogo points are done. It's created those. So if you did have additional vertices, okay, and you did find that they're extra points, we'll talk about managing those later. One thing I will stress is that just bear in mind, if it can't work out, and this is a good example, this polyline here I used for that very command, okay? And you'll notice that actually abuts 1, 2, 3 different roads. The software or that particular tool is intelligent enough to know that this point here should not be connected to that road. It's actually closer to this road. And it'll actually show, you can see there, it's actually done the little marker. And we'll talk about that marker in just a sec. This point was so far out of range that it didn't know whether or not to connect to that one or that one. So it's maintained the elevation at 100. Okay, so we'll look at how we can edit those later. So just be aware, it might not be perfect, but it's because you've got, corner lots such as this where it might not be able to calculate. Now, as you probably just saw there, these are group editable. These are actually dynamic blocks that we have created. There's attributed data into these blocks, which we assign properties. Now, we're not going to go into that today, because as I said, out of the box, this will do everything that you're seeing today. So if I wanted to reposition the Cogo point, if I wanted to maybe flick the point over, just using the dynamic positioning here, it's the same goes for the BricsCAD users. We have the same technology going on. You can begin to move those points around, including a rotation. Okay, so if you wanted to rotate that along that alignment, you can do so. So very, very easy to work with. If I move that point away, so this point here is actually the position. If I move that away and then go update points, that point was told to connect to that polyline on that vertex and use that particular elevation of the road. It will not move unless we actually go and change its position later on. So it's always dynamically linked. Now, we've created some points. Where are these points actually going? Well, on the ribbon, we're just going to pop up to point groups. Now, if you've never seen point groups before, if you've done surveying, then this will make a whole heap of sense to you. If you haven't, well, point group essentially is a way of segregating or aggregating all of your points and putting them into little pots, so little groups, as you can see here. So down the left-hand side, we've got a number of sort of pre-set up point groups, and the one that we're looking at here is design points lot description. So any point, Cogo point, that has LOT in it, which is what I did at the start there, doesn't matter about what happens afterwards, is sitting in this list. And this list is what we use later on to assign the vertical design of the Cogo point, or use the elevation data from the Cogo point. So this list is very, very critical. The way it works is very simple. All we do is we have up the top here an include tab. And as you can see here, we have predefined this. So it says any point that has a code that equals LOT asterisk, which these do over here on the left-hand side, include them in this little group. I've also added PAR, which could be parcel. Now, what this does not allow for is uppercase and lowercase. So if I wanted to be lazy, which let's face it, we could be, and you decide, well, look, if it equals LOT asterisk, that just adds those Cogo points to this list as well, just in case we forget to put an uppercase. So that is important. It's going to go back to the point list. Every single one of these points will be listed in here. We actually have quite a neat little, because this is the lots, we set this up so that you can actually see a particular Cogo point, the code that it references, the reference grade. And even for those that are not connected to the road, such as this one here, this is actually connected to another Cogo point. You can see that one's connected at 10%. In fact, let's just left click on that one, number 7. I'm going to move the form slightly off screen, but there's number 7. If I left click on that, you can actually see it's 10%. So this graphic is really, really good. Where you remember previously at the start, I said about putting a 0.001. If you leave the reference grade as nothing, or put in just a millimeter, if you leave it as nothing, you won't see that little connection. But just putting a small value just allows you to see what the reference is for that particular point. So the point group is a great way of visualizing. So if you wanted to sort of move beyond this point and go, well, actually, I'd like to now maybe see these in a table on the drawing, or export them as a KML. This is just a quick aside. Okay, you can actually export all of your points that drop into this group and actually have them displayed in Google Earth Pro. And I'll just show you how this works. So I'm just going to click on Export KML. And we go ahead and we pick National Grids Australia. Now, this job is to MGA. So do bear in mind, this is the transformation or data coordinate system we're applying here, but this job is to MGA coordinates. We click Apply. And I'm just going to go project. I'm going to call this project points and click on save. You could call this whatever you want. You can see it's just going to C drive temp. Click on save. I've got Google Earth Pro already open in the background. At this point, it would traditionally open up Google Earth Pro for you, and then it would move you into the position where we're at now. So they're all the code. These are the ones I just created down here. Look. So these are the ones I've just added. You can keep exporting and overwriting and bringing this file into Google Earth Pro as often as you want. Now, you'll notice the line work's also in here. If I just close this down, we'll just click on save and then close the point groups. On the roads tab, I think on all platforms in the utilities panel, there's a KML export. And you'll notice I had the road line work there. You can run that same tool and export your road models. So you can do your road models, and you could, or models, full stop, built models, and also include Cogo points. So it's just a quick aside I wanted to show you. So that's the point group. Let's go back to site. Now, this is the critical part. I'm just going to zoom up to lot 34, lot 33. Now, you'll notice that these Cogo points here all have the same elevation, okay? Clearly, they wouldn't have the same elevation because you can see the road is on a slope here. So why is that happening? Well, when you create Cogo points and you tell them to reference the road or a road string, or any other string for that matter, what you're actually doing is telling it to use the closest or most previous sample line position. So if I open up a cross section on, in fact, let's do this the proper way, should get into the habit of doing this, using the grips, view cross section window, you'll notice that the end elevation on that cross section matches the elevation of those Cogo points. Now, the question is, well, okay, clearly, if the sample line is dictating the elevation of those Cogo points, how am I going to quickly create sample lines at those particular spots? Well, in V23, we included a new tool to create sample lines along a string, in addition to your existing samples, to pick up the Cogo points. So let's just have a look at this. I'm going to run resample sections. You can, if you want to, and you've got time to do it, run add extra sections. This process is automatic and will update. I'm going to click near row 2. Then in here, you can go to use points. So everything in row 2 is generic. Okay. The first thing you need to do is click apply. Okay, I used to miss this, and we've put it up here in a bit of bold now so people see it. This is why the point group is important. So basically, I'm saying, look, any points in that lock group, I want to use to create sample line positions for me. So design points, lot description, done. There is a video on YouTube, on our Civil Site Design YouTube channel, which talks about how you can link in Civil 3D Cogo Points using this button. So worth taking a look at the sample lines playlist in the YouTube channel. Underneath, I've predefined these. When you're using Cogo Points, and they are generally, and they will probably be a lot closer together than I've got them here, because your boundary offset's probably be smaller, I'd recommend that you put in these kind of values, okay? For the distance between the sections, the rounding, and then how often it should find them. Those 3 numbers here, I would say, are the most critical ones. Once you've set those up, and then you make sure you're computing standard sections, this means that you're going to incorporate the current sections every 10 meters. Okay, so you don't want to lose those. The maximum offset, I should stress, is actually at the corridor width. So 10 meters left and right of the center line, it will look for these points. Obviously, I don't want that to be 1,000. Otherwise, it's going to be adding sample lines out here, searching off to the left for Cogo points, which I don't need. We're going to click apply, or OK, sorry, and then click OK. Now, that will go ahead and resample my road. And that is a much quicker way of adding sample lines generally, let alone making sure that these elevations are up to date. Now, you'll notice they all say 435. So we're going to go to site, and we're going to go up here and update points. So it's a little bit chicken and egg. You're creating the point, resampling the road, and then you need to update the point again. But look, at the end of the day, that's just how it has to be managed. And I will show you a thread at the very end to show you how you can update your road and then have everything connected and updating for you without having to go through that process. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at the cross-section window. I just want to show you briefly. I did open the cross-section window a second ago, and I should have just kept it open if I'm honest with you. By the way, if you've never seen the grips before, I have mentioned them previously. They are basically set up under any one of the main tabs, apart from pipes, under the active drawing settings pull down grip settings. Okay, so my grips, these little grips here, are actually quite small. I like to have them quite small on the drawing. So this is where they come from. So I'm going to hover over this particular grip here and view cross section much quicker than going up to the ribbon. And what I want to do is now see points on here. So I can go to the survey tab. We go ahead and pick our group. This is why the group is so important. Show points, and immediately something happens. Now, the way that this works is that it's basically using this tolerance value here. If you go show elevations, using this tolerance value of 5, which if you think about it, is actually just a simple radius. So if you imagine you're drawing a circle from the end of the cross section, I think it's this cross section, with a radius of 5, any points within that radius will be picked up, and the same goes at the other end of the cross section. So I'm just going to punch in, maybe we'll try a smaller number here. Or you can see as soon as I type that number in, that value drops. So nice way of being able to give you some context. In fact, we might make that 2. Update. What was it before? 5, wasn't it? So update, because it's this point here is a little bit further away. It's not grabbing that one, but so that's how it works. So I just wanted to show you that it's a neat way of being able to give you some context. For those of you that saw the PowerPoint earlier, are wondering, to get that surface of that grading string in, I went to display, add, and I added the surface of the grading string just simply using this particular tool. So I'm going to go all, surface, and we'll go lot 33 and click OK. Typically, I think I'm on the wrong lot here. Yes, I am. So let's just scroll forward. And I think the reason why I'm not seeing that is purely because my sampling. So it's something I should have mentioned earlier on as well. I've made the sampling of my road extremely wide on the right-hand side. But anyway, we may come back to that a little bit later. That's just sort of a bonus thing. We don't necessarily need to be able to see it. So we've got our Cogo points. We know where they live. We know how they were connected onto the road. Now it's a case of, well, how can I now apply those to the design? I will cover very shortly how to edit them and add extras, okay? So don't feel that at the moment I haven't covered doing more with them. I will get to that. So we're going to look at lot 38. And the best way to really have this area designed, rather than going through and creating lots of civil 3D alignments, I would suggest would be creating a grading string. So I'm going to come up to, this is found on a number of different panels. I'm going to go create grading, click on my polyline, and just if you've never used it before, when you put LOT in the prefix here, the software remembers that you want to put lot as your name prefix. This is why it's already written as lot. If you put, I don't know, roads, it'll always put roads there. So just so you know, that's why it says LOT immediately. I'm going to put in here lot 38. Don't want a template. This is simply just an empty string. Okay, the target surface, which is the surface reference in the background, if I did apply batters with BDNS, the initial elevation, well, I can put something in. Maybe I'll put 34, even though it's going to be updated in a minute. And then the spacings. Now, if you are doing a lot of these, later on I'm going to show you a way of updating them all versus against the road, so the road updates. Now, what that could mean is that you've got a lot of grading strings to have to go and update all together. And in Rod's case, he had about 200, so there's a lot going on. When you have a spacing of 1,000, all that means is that it's only going to show you in the cross section, in the long section very shortly, the sample positions at the horizontal geometry points only, which, to be fair, they are the only points I want to edit anyway, okay? So having a big spacing value on these initially can be helpful, but you can try it yourself. You can put smaller spacings, and then as the job grows, maybe look to increase them. The rest of the values in here aren't really applicable. Corner angle increments is to do, and the method here are to do with when I have a template applied, which I don't. You don't actually have to have a surface applied here. I'm putting a surface on my grading string so I can see the contours, okay? You could use Model Builder, which we will do shortly, and actually see all of your grading strings added in there and see the contours. So you don't actually need to create a surface. It really is up to you. I'm going to leave this empty, so we do. Click on Create Update. And let's give that a second to work its magic. Right, that's done. And I know it's done because the vertical grading is now available on the tab at the top. So at the moment, generic grading string, no association whatsoever to what I've put on the polyline. This is the point where we go vertical grading. You can see the spacings only picking up the the horizontal geometry. Oh, I should have mentioned this. So V23, we added these little buttons down here. So if you haven't seen them, have a click. So they're all over the shop, including design constraints. If you go to design constraints, you get a different video button. If I click that, I need to show you because there are so many people that maybe haven't upgraded yet. It opens up your browser and will automatically show you videos related to that tool. So there's design constraints. I just close that down and go back to the home tab, click on this button again. Now I'm actually getting vertical grading editor. Maybe I want to go grading, click on that button. And this will grow as well, because at the moment we've done a first pass on a load of forms, but this will only keep increasing. And it uses playlists, which means that we can take videos out and replace them when they become outdated. So you're only seeing relevant content. Had to mention that quick aside. So the Cogo points. How can we now connect those elevations directly onto the vertical design? It's done through auto profile. So if I click on auto profile, this is where reference civil points has actually been there for, as I said, since about V21. So you click on reference civil points and you say really what chainage range you would like to look for these Cogo points, so the whole way around, what group you'd like to use. Now, you may be thinking at this point, well, hang on a second, you've got lots of points in that group. How do I just pick up the ones that are very, very close to my grading string? Well, this is where we put in this very small number here. So it's going to search 10 mil 10 mil off that polyline and look for Cogo points, meaning it's only going to grab the ones that are exactly on it. I'll show you a little bit later how you can use the grade and elevation shift with this as well, which is quite cool. We're going to click OK. If I then click Calculate Profile, I've now got a live representation of those Cogo points being displayed on that on my design, bearing in mind that the Cogo points at the front are reading the elevations of the road, and the ones at the back are 5% below those. So the whole thing is now dynamic. So let's now have a look. We're leaving the VG open at this point. There's the contours for my grading string. This grading string surface. It's just closed down the grading string form. I'm going to leave the VG open as much as possible now, just to show you how we can now begin to see, make changes. So the first thing I would stress is how to edit these. So at the moment, you can simply go up to the ribbon. I'm going to show you a slightly different method in a second. Edit point, click on edit point, click on the point, press enter. You're actually sent into this initial form, which is all to do with the properties. So you could, if you wanted to, you could actually go in here and override LOT and put something else. Really, the crux of why I'm getting you to use edit point is to change the position, which is this one here, setup position. This takes us into the form which controls how that point is elevated, and actually controlled in respect of the horizontal position as well. What I'm going to do is close that down. I haven't made any edits. I'm actually going to show you a much quicker way. Now, Civil 3D AutoCAD users, I'm going to show you the BricsCAD version in a second. You can edit your point by left-clicking, hovering over this circle. Edit Cogo Point sends you back to the same form I had earlier open a second ago. Set dynamic position takes you straight to the position of that point. So as far as shortcut goes, that's a much quicker way of going, oh, okay, so that should actually be 1%. Click apply. That elevation updates. Now it shows me as 1%. If I, in BricsCAD, want to do that same change, I'm just firing up a video for the BricsCAD users, only 20 seconds long. It's using something called the quad. So BricsCAD users, you won't see, as you'll see in a second, you won't see that grip for the hover, but what you do get is the quad down here. When you go and hover over the Cogo point, not left click on it, hover over the quad that opens up, you get a contextual, I'm going to pause that there. You get a contextual ribbon on civil site design objects. So if you're on a civil site design string or on a civil site design surface, this quad menu actually updates and will provide you with contextual items related to that particular tool. And the main reason is because we've obviously got a lot of these tools through the grips in the AutoCAD BricsCAD users, for the AutoCAD BricsCAD users, and you can't access those tools in the same way. So the quad is your mechanism to get to those particular features, which you can see it does here. So yes, hovering, and then I can go and edit set the dynamic position. Now, what I might do here is show you how this dynamic positioning works. So I'm going to edit a point again. So I'm going to left click on this point at the top. You can see the 5%. What I might decide is, well, actually, I don't want it connected to the frontage there. I want it connected to an entirely different Cogo point. So I'm going to hover over the grip and click on Set Dynamic Position. And then all I'm going to do is go, and you can see, well, look, when we did this originally, we used reference string code. I can still use that if I want to, but I can actually go reference Cogo Point. It's referencing 63 at the moment. I'm going to click on the little picker tool. I decide that it should be referencing 0.64 and press enter. And that should be, because it's higher up, that should now be 10%. Click apply. And as we can see, that's now updated. Now, in the vertical grading editor, you don't need to go back into auto profile. In V22, I think it was, we allowed you to rerun auto profile entries by hitting this button. So let's just now do that. Because that point there and that point there are essentially the start and end of the polyline, you can see that they've now dropped. So let's just go and make that, change that. We now decide, well, actually, that was not quite what I was after. Then the lot is way too steep. And let's just go and make that 5%. Click apply, and then just hit refresh. Much better. So that's how you can edit the position of a Cogo point and change its reference. There was another part to that, was the horizontal, which is what I'm going to cover now, which is adding another point. So, okay, If you've got another polyline, you can go ahead and, use that same tool to create points on that polyline. But what if you want to add an intermediate point of some sort? To do that, in the same pull down as points by polyline, you've got create points. Now, create points is essentially the manual process. Well, I say manual. The only difference is it's going to create one point instead of a load of them along the vertices of a polyline. So the code we're going to be popping in here is LOT. Remember, we've got uppercase and lowercase kind of covered off. I want to dynamically position this. Click on setup. If I wanted to, as I've done on some points further in the job, I can just go ahead and click somewhere. When you are using Cogo Points in this scenario, we recommend that you reference the 2D polyline. And that's simply down to how the Cogo point and the string interact later on. So when the string tries to find the Cogo point, it actually works very well if the point is referenced onto the 2D polyline. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the polyline here. And I could pick a chainage if I want. Let's go and pick a chainage. So I'm going to say it needs to be, I'm just going to use a snap there. Obviously, I can tweak that number. And then the elevation needs to be, let's go reference Cogo Point, go and pick the one at the front. And that should be -5. Okay. Again, I'm just using the same number, but it makes it nice and simple. Click apply. Click on, at this point, you can change the way it looks. I wouldn't recommend you do that. All you need to do is click create point. The form will pop back open again because it allows you to create multiple. Just click on close on the top right. That point's now gone in. I then decide, well, actually, yeah, rotation. Let's just tweak that. I could have unchecked that option a second ago. So there's my Cogo point, just as LOT. Let's hit refresh in the vertical grading editor. There's that point now added in. Okay, so that point is now part, because it's part of that group, it's now being picked up as part of the design. Let's just say you decide you want to get rid of it. You can get rid of it like this: erase command, delete, gone. Okay. The only obviously downside is that there is no real redo for this, but we've accounted for this by actually on the edit point pull down using undelete points. There's the point I just deleted. Now, if you want to just say, yeah, I never want to see that point again, you can go clean recovery database. If you do want it back again, just use recover selected point. Then it comes back in. So that database is housing all the points that you'll have got rid of gradually through the project. So it's nice and easy to get rid of them if you don't want them, but it's also great to just be able to bring them back into the project if you need. Now, just before I move on to the next part, Todd, any sort of critical questions or anything that we can address?
No, there was a question about where the command was buried on BricsCAD, and I'm just typing answers now, but now that I'm live, I will say it out loud. I can't remember exactly which version you said it came into, but
Surfaces tab. Yeah, so sorry, yeah.
So in BricsCAD, it's called Surfaces, and then you're looking for the Cogo Points and Survey panel. So very similar to the one there. And then it's the import points is the default code at the top there. The bottom half of the button is a drop down, and you'll find then there the points from Polyline command. But that only came in I can't remember exactly which version of
V22.2.
Thank you. I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I know it was only recent. So this is Philip. Just check your version, but if it's not the most recent, upgrade to the recent. But that's where you need to look. Thank you. Absolutely. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Todd. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend you get onto V23 as well, because V23 has the resample option, which is really the quickest way to be able to build your sample positions. So just going to, now I've created this, we will look at Model Builder shortly. I just want to show you another example of how you can incorporate these for those guys that aren't specifically doing lots. This is an example of a couple of Cogo points I've created manually, and you can see I've put them in a group called SO. So I don't want them to be picked up by my lots or anything to do with that lot group. SO just stands for set out. Okay, so I've just put SO in there. You can create whatever you want, and at the end of the day, the point group can be defined however you want. They could include points that have your own specific or special codes. This particular one has a couple of points. As you can see here, I'm just going to run update points and just see if that, there we go. So the update points just gave that a bit of a refresh. You can see they're actually got some kind of reference. So immediately I know that they're referencing something, but what is it? So I'm going to go in and go set dynamic position. You can see the location up here is completely generic, but they're referencing a grading string. Happens to be a building pad. just something easy peasy I've just created just with a simple template. This one happens to be 10% below the edge of the building pad or slab, and this one happens to be 5%. Not suggesting that what I'm going to do next is necessarily a great example of how you can incorporate them, but maybe you're designing a boundary or some kind of string along here which needs to be below or above these Cogo points. Well, using the tools that we've kind of already looked at, we can do that. So I'm going to just pop up to the, I'll tell you what, see if we can get the grips block reference. There we go. Selection cycling coming to the rescue there. We're going to open up the vertical grading of this profile string, which is controlling the boundary of this reconstructed road or rehab road, whatever you want to call it, just going down here. So I've got a boundary here. I need to have those points control and create some IPs for me through my design. Now, you may notice the pink line that's being applied on the drawing at the moment. That is a design constraint. I already showed you earlier. You'll need to refer back to the video. Click on that button if you want to learn how to do a design constraint. In fact, I think the video on number 3 or 2 actually does exactly what I did in here. In fact, no, I think it's the first video. So all I wanted to do is show a string, and that's it, with an offset of 40. So look 40 meters and show me the extent of that string. So that's the building platform. Let's pop back to the home tab. So what I want to do is be, let's say I need to be 0.5 meter below those Cogo points. Okay. What we can do is go auto profile. You can see I've got a reference point entry in there. And again, if you want to learn more about reference point, click on that little button. What I'm going to do is say, look, yep, okay, so I'm at the moment 2% above my footpath. I'm designing this boundary, but what I need to do is just see where those points are going to strike my design. We can go reference civil points, and maybe this is a good example of where you would refine the chainage range. I'm just going to say from about 160 to 185. You can see the changes there, 160 to 185, and we're going to grab the point group, and this one's called SO, just because, you know, keeps things nice and clean. The elevation shift is, okay, I want to make sure that I'm 0.5 meter below those Cogo points, and how far do I want to search? It's probably only about 5 meters, so let's just go 5 meters. Click OK, and click on Calculate Profile. Lo and behold, there we have 2 Cogo points being created and positioned onto my vertical design with that exact reference. So this is kind of the opposite. What I was doing before was using a Cogo point against a Cogo point to set 5% above it or below it. Whereas in this one, I'm actually just editing the auto profile entry to determine the elevational shift or the grade. So this is another good example of where you can use it. But I wanted to highlight that, not just keep it completely lot focused, but show you another example. At the end of the day, you guys can go away and play with these tools in a way which works for you. Look, it could be that you employ them for car parks. It could be that you employ them in different ways when it comes to looking at maybe having to have terracing, staggers, retaining walls between them. You can actually use different groups. You could use a different group for each lot. Okay, and then say to the auto profile, well, I want these Cogo points on this side here to be 1 meter below this particular group. So you can basically play around with this and have a go and seeing how it works best for you. But hopefully with what I'm showing you at the moment, it's really just giving you the absolute basics of creating them, editing them, adding additional ones, and then applying them to your vertical design. This should be enough to sort of get you moving forward. The next bit really, I guess, isn't particularly Cogo point focused, but it's really, well, I've got these lots. I've designed a few of them. Maybe I've even done this particular, what we'd sort of call, I guess, a block here, block of lots. Notice how this one's 100. Let's just go in and change it. Now you know how it's done. I'm going to go set dynamic position. This might not look that great because the elevational changes around here, this does actually require a retaining wall. So let's just be brave. Let's go and pick reference Cogo point, and we'll reference the one at the front, and we'll be, I don't know, we're going to be going down. So let's go minus, I'm punching in 5. It's my favorite number. Oh, it's not too bad. There we go. So that's gone in. What I would now need to do is run a thread to go and update all of this. But what I'm going to do is run that at the end, show you how that's all being done. First things first, my model. I want to connect these together and add them to the road and see them in some kind of context. We're going to go to the roads tab and go to model viewer first of all. And in model viewer, at the moment, I don't think we're showing a lot. I keep saying a lot as well, which hopefully isn't confusing anybody. No, just showing the roads. So what I'm going to do is get the software to basically join this together to create one single model for me, and that's using Model Builder. So I'm going to go up to Model Builder. And if you were starting this from scratch, you just go link to auto model, which means that it keeps all of your road trimming and curb returns all intact. I've already got one created. I'm going to go edit model. It's called roads lots. And in here, we're going to just go to the inputs tab. So the include exclude tab, and we're going to batch grab those guys, include. In fact, I'm not going to grab that block because I haven't updated it yet, and lot 33 and lot 38. I'm going to go build. Yeah, the reason why I'd already created it is because when Model Builder fires up in a second, what it will do is it will triangulate, obviously, lots of excess triangles, which I don't necessarily need to see. And in fact, just to show you what that would look like, I'm going to go mesh. So there would be a whole heap of excess triangles, but you can see there's some here. I've just gone in and done a little bit of a tidy up using Surface Manager to delete those triangles, which means that they don't get recreated. So that's why I've already had it redone. Saves a bit of time on the webinar. Going to save the Model Builder model and close down Toggle Display. I'm going to go and I'm just going to restart Model Viewer just to give it a chance to see that particular model in its list. So we're going to go Toggle Display in one very short second, and there we go, Toggle Display, and then pick my roads and lots model. If you wanted to, you could just not do that, and you could turn on your individual grading string surfaces. It really is up to you. So here we have the lots, and you can see, because, and that's the other reason, by the way, you don't draw your grading strings on top of each other, because that's the type of thing you wouldn't be seeing. Okay, the software would be struggling to interpolate which elevation to read where, whereas because we've got this nice gap, you can begin to see the stepping between the actual between the lots. The reason why this one is a different color, again, it's just a quick tip for you. If you're using grading strings, when you use a grading string, I think this is lot 34, you can apply for model viewer only a replacement code. So when it creates this grading string with no template, it uses the code CL, CL, CL. And if you think about it, for the road, that is also being used, CL, CL, CL. So what it uses is pavement. And I don't want to see pavement for all my lots. So I've replaced the CL just for model viewer only with L34. I could have put whatever I'd wanted. I could have put lot, whatever I wanted. Close that down. When I right click and assign material group, I'm allowed to edit and create a unique color or render just for that code combination, which you can see at the top here, 343434. Just a quick highlight for you. Just want to make sure you guys know how that's done. So I could do that on all my grading strings, given unique coding, which I know some of you guys do. So we've gone in, we've made got our Model Builder model looking pretty good. Now someone comes in and says, right, well, we're going to have to adjust the road on the frontage. So I go down here, I'm going to go open vertical grading. In fact, what we'll do is we'll go Toggle Display here, models and line work, and turn this on to be dynamic. Because if I make an edit at the moment, nothing will change on my Model Builder model until I hit rebuild. Now it will change automatically. I'm not too bothered about the line work. Let's click OK. So let's open up the vertical design for road 2, and let's just move. I'm just being drastic here. I'm going to move the whole thing up by a meter. Now, when you close the vertical grading editor, you're actually asking it to do a number of updates, but it will be running the updates in the background anyway. So that's now just happened. Close that down. Okay, there's our problem. Now, the thing about the design is that, yes, it's dynamically linked, but I've got to kind of go through, resample my road if I want to, update my Cogo points, update all my grading strings individually, then rebuild my entire Model Builder model. Now, you could do that on a piece-by-piece, lot-by-lot basis, but my suggestion is this, and I'm just going to turn off the triangles in the drawing. Use a thread. And I'm aware, based on many discussions with people, that threads are not on people's agenda yet, and I totally get it. It's another thing that you may be thinking, oh, I've got to learn, but I'm going to try and keep this really, really simple. So what I want to do is create a string of commands that will do all of what I just explained in the one command. So I'm going to go up to the threads pull down, which is on the roads tab. We're going to go thread editor. And we're going to go over here and click on add to create a new thread. I'm going to call this update lots. So we've got a blank canvas. What is it that we're going to update first? Well, look, if I change my road will have actually resampled by updating it. What I want to happen is for these Cogo points here to reread those samples, which have now potentially got different elevations. So we have a very simple update here called update Cogo points, and we click add action. So Cogo points update. Now, the only thing is we have Cogo points referencing other Cogo points. So what may happen is that they all update together at the same time, and this Cogo point at the back never gets a chance to reread the new elevation of this one, which has just been updated. So all we're going to do is run update Cogo points again. Just gives really all the Cogo points a chance to refresh. Then once we've done that, we then need to tell the vertical geometry of our grading strings to reread those Cogo point elevations. And you can do that. So rather than going through the vertical grading editor, you can just go compute vertical geometry, add action. If you've never used this one before, I can guarantee you, if you're doing lots and lots of auto profile entries for strings and you need them to all update, this is a really, just having a thread which just does this one thing is incredibly useful. All I'm going to do is pick grading. So any grading strings that I create on this project will be told to resample. I don't have to keep adding them into this list, even though that I've only got a few selected in here. Click on add action. Now you'll notice that that went in the middle, and this is me, and I always do this. I think on webinars I do it most frequently, and I'll show you why in a second. It's gone into the middle, okay, and I'll show you why that does that. Once I've done that, I then want my grading strings to basically be resampled and for the surfaces to be updated. So this is where I go resample grading strings, add action, and I just pick, maybe I pick all, and probably not too fussed about the other one in the middle there. What you should be aware of is this is below selected is always on by default, and I always forget it should just be bottom. If you want it to go to the bottom, as you saw there, I can move them up and down. So update the Cogo points, compute the vertical design, resample my grading strings. Really, that should get it to a point where it's updated. The model that's using the roads and these grading strings really needs an update. So I go compute design model, add action, and we go ahead and we pick road and lots, and we put it to the bottom of the list, add action. So there's my thread. That's all you need to do, okay? The one thing I'm going to do is, because I've got model viewer open, is actually have model viewer refresh as well. And we actually have one for it. So we go update model viewer, add action, put it to the bottom of the list, please. So that's the last thing that happens, totally optional. So just to see how this would run, let's just see if we can get this in a view which clearly shows the step which is going to happen here. We're going to go compute thread. So it's got quite a few things to have to do, but I don't want to have to do all of these lots individually. So let's just run that through. There's model viewer giving itself a refresh, done. So you can see why on Rod's job with 200 lots, having the Cogo points connected to the road and then referencing the rear and then having terracing, how the Cogo points were an invaluable tool in his armory for maintaining and managing the design. Just having that one thread, and if you want to run it separately outside of the thread editor, you can go run threads, updated lots, and you can go compute thread. Again, little video button down there if you haven't used them before to teach you how to operate them. So that's really the extent of what I wanted to show you today, really keeping it nice and simple, using the tools out of the box, using grading strings, model builder to combine everything together, and then looking at how you can change and design, change the references on these Cogo points, begin to employ them. Now, Todd, is there any additional questions before I kind of
yes, there is actually. There was one. I was waiting for the best time to bring it up because I'll be honest, I'm not 100% certain what the question's relating to, so I might sing it out to you and see if you've got an idea on what it means.
Now's the time. Do it.
There is another one that is just an absolute thank you to you, Jonathan, that they're going to go off and upgrade their software from the looks of it. So
excellent.
I thought I would put that one up there. So it sounds like we've shown people enough new stuff in the software to encourage an upgrade, which is great. This one is from, I'm hoping I'm allowed to say the guy's name. Clinton was asking about adding, I suspect he's talking about adding points in for sampling mesh generation, but then was also asking about, here we go, point number 66. So in the drawing, He wants to know why point number 66 is not added into the triangulation of the surface. So if,
yeah,
I think I now know
good,
what he's talking about.
yeah, okay, it's not, because it's not part of the Cogo point, is not part of the surface. The IP that we create on the vertical design around the edge of this grading string is generating the surface itself.
Yeah.
So the Cogo point is not being added directly to any surface. And now you've reminded me, I will show you how you can, if you want to, add them to a surface, which is using this button up here. So if you have created point groups explicitly for different areas of your project, you can automatically have those points added to a surface, and you can have that surface name right there. The only caveat with that, and I've just realized there was something in model viewer I was going to show you, so I'm going to do that whilst we're firing this up. The only caveat with this is that your surface that you're creating is purely points based. There is no break line data to work with your surface. So it's creating a surface of points, but then the triangulation will just be however the software triangulates between them. So just be aware that that is something you won't get. And this is why, I mean, it took us quite a while to get to this point to determine the best way to do this, but this is why we use the grading strings and model builder, because it also allows you to incorporate threads and make updates. So, and it actually gives you a much better surface.
And if we wanted to add 0.66 to that grading surface there, then the way
Well,
it is to mind to me. Well, is it? Because if you put the triangles on for that surface, so just
well, it's an IP. It's an IP on that surface. So if we go and find lot 38.
Yeah. See the triangles.
It's not. I see what you're saying. Yeah, now I'm with you.
So the only way to add it in that I could think to do it would be to add actually an extra sample point in there in the polyline itself, because it's the vertices of the polyline that control it.
That's a very good point. Yeah, which you can't do because it's a grading string. So because it's a grading string, there's no way of being adding in a sample position exactly at that particular
polyline that defines it in the first
place.
place.
Well, there is that. You could put the vertex. You could put a vertex
on
that
That's what I'm saying.
polyline.
Like you could actually reverse it by editing the polyline, add a vertex to where the point is, and then resample the whole thing, and then recompute, and then you probably get a sample point at that point, and then the triangulation would pick it up. But it's a bit of a round trip.
It is. It is.
But yeah, that's the only way I can think of, Clinton, to actually do it. I just wanted to clarify exactly what it is you're after, but thank you for all the repeated questions and clarifying the details. So
yeah,
thank you for that, Jonathan. There's another question just come in. Will it work on AutoCAD instead of Civil 3D?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So everything we're showing you will work on all of the platforms that we showed earlier. So the BricsCAD versions, the Civil 3D versions, the AutoCAD versions. The main difference is that the BricsCAD versions, you need to utilize a thing called the quad to access some of the grip commands that Jonathan had shown in the video. But there was there was a nice little excerpt in that in the video, so that's for someone I think's come late. So if you watch the playback on the video on the YouTube channel afterwards, you'll see what we're talking about there. But yes, everything is functional across all versions of the software.
Absolutely, yeah. That was the intention of showing today. It was yeah. You can do all of this. And by the way, the reason why you're not seeing any step down here is because this is actually part of that 5%. So the reason why we're not seeing a break in the contours is because that's maintaining 5% all the way through. So that point is doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So,
but if it had a different grade in there, if you maybe made it have it as a grade break, then obviously it would.
Let's just see what we get.
I was going to say, let's just see what happens. I'm curious. See if it.
And then what we'll do is rather than look, you could. Potentially, I'm just going to go edit grading here because really this is where it should happen. I'm going to go create update. I might have to do, this is where the auto profile thing is sort of tucked away. Refresh, that needs to refresh before you can get to this point. So we close that down.
Yep.
And what we should see is just while it's working its magic in the background is, there we go, close that down, create update. Not too sure why it's asking me to provide. That should be a significant break in the contours. So what we just do is go back in and double check.
It's there.
Just what it's doing. For some reason, it's asking me for an initial elevation, which is unusual. But anyway, I can go through and run my thread. So I'm going to go through and run that now. Update lots, compute thread. Just while I'm doing that, I will just mention that you can see the Cogo points using the survey tab in model viewer. That lot group again, sorry, the point group is the critical part to all of this. So just make sure. For some reason that is not updating, which is typical right at the very end. Not sure why that point is deciding that it isn't wanting to update on the grading stream. But anyway, it could be that the sampling is also something I need to address. But just while we were looking at that, my point was to show you this, which is showing the labels. Have a look at what this allows you to do, but you can now see your Cogo points at their intended position in the model viewer, which is what I showed you on the slides at the start. Okie doke. Any other questions, Todd?
No, we're all good.
Fantastic.
They're all the ones. Clinton had a few, and a couple I mentioned. So no, we're all.
What I'll do is I'll bring
all
up the
clear.
final slide, guys. If you have got any other questions, look, this is really a summary of what we've done today. You can have a look at this, obviously, on the recording if you want, really just to see where the key points of this webinar were. And we do timestamp the webinars. So really, a lot of these specific parts or chapters of this video are going to be timestamped, so you can go and get to the bits that you want to see. So I'm really hoping that you've been able to take as much out of this as possible. And obviously Todd's already mentioned a couple of people, but certainly compared to where we were at the end of last year, this really wasn't an option, what we're doing today. So I'm really hoping that for many of you, you'll be able to go away, apply some of what you've taken away on this webinar, and have some success in your projects, not just in lot grading, but in other areas as well. If you do have some interesting feedback about how this operates, or where you've seen it benefit in other areas of other projects, then please let us know. Which really brings me on to the any other questions part, which I think we've kind of exhausted now. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to drop them in just while I'm kind of summarizing the end here. But yes, Todd's already mentioned Civil Site Design YouTube channel. We do have a Civil Survey Solutions YouTube channel, which is where everything non-civil site design goes. What we're finding is that the civil site design one is really becoming the new repository for all of, well, anything civil site design related, including those video playlists that I was running from the forms in the software. And if you do want to get the newsletter to find out when these webinars run, feel free to go to the following and have a look and subscribe. Todd, in that case, there's a bit of role reversal going on here. Normally you share this bit and close off.
Hang on, quick, last question has just popped in. So let's see what that is. Each Cogo Point can have a 3D design placed on a layer. Can they be added to the design surface triangle? I think you answered that anyway. The answer is yes. So you can use the point groups. You can use the point group to filter which points you're interested in based on a code or a number. And then you could make a terrain model from that particular point group. So you could bypass the polyline and the grading altogether if you really wanted to. So the answer to that one is very much yes, just a slightly different process, but Jonathan did show that very quickly about 5 minutes ago.
Yep.
All right. Yes, so if there are no more questions, and Jonathan, if you have exhausted absolutely everything on your agenda.
I think I have, yes.
Then I think we are at a very nice point to finish. So number one, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And as Jonathan said, there is our YouTube channels for the civil site design specific stuff, or the civil survey solutions for the remainder of all our stuff. Great resource from a design point of view. I don't know how many times I talk to people when I'm doing training. That's a perfectly legitimate and a fantastic resource for them to be able to see how you do things rather than just reading it on a piece of paper. You can actually see it real. Yep, subscribe to our newsletters, then you'll be able to get the latest updates of everything that we're doing in terms of events. And I would normally talk about agenda for upcoming webcasts, but we don't have any at this particular juncture, so keep an eye out for that newsletter. We'll talk about when our new ones are coming out. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for a very informative and very interactive design process. It's making things look so much easier than the way I used to do this thing sort of years ago. It was like, draw lines, set levels, change road, reset levels. Like it was a very, very much a back and a forth element. So making things look a hell of a lot more dynamic. And those threads, if people haven't looked at threads, they are a time saver, exactly as Jonathan showed. Instead of you having to go through and regenerate each vertical design off the auto profiles, you can just do it all in one foul swoop. Just hit the button and it just do it. And you can make them up as many things as you like. They're like macros, basically. Fantastic thing to function. So on that note, I will end the meeting. Again, thank you everybody for attending and look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
No worries. See you, everybody.